Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were at your breaking point? Like life just kept pushing and pulling until you didn't know if you had any strength left? Have you ever looked up at the sky and said, God, I can't take it anymore? If you've ever been there, if you've ever felt like the weight of life was too much to carry, I need you to lean in and listen to me right now. God won't let you break. Life has a way of making us question our own strength. The weight of responsibilities, the disappointments, the unexpected losses, they all pile up until we start wondering, can I really handle this? But let me tell you something. You are built stronger than you think. God designed you to endure, to rise, to withstand storms that would have crushed someone else. The fact that you are still here, still standing, still fighting, is proof that you carry a strength far greater than you realize. Think about this. When an architect designs a building, they don't just create something that looks good on the outside. No. They test the structure, they calculate the weight it can carry, they reinforce it so that when the winds come, when the pressure increases, it won't collapse under the strain. That's exactly what God has done with you. He didn't just place you on this earth without equipping you. He fortified you. He strengthened your core. He placed within you a resilience that is not easily broken. But here's the thing, strength isn't something you always feel. Strength isn't measured in how easy life is, but in how you keep pushing forward when everything around you says, stop. Have you ever noticed how some people go through the worst seasons of their lives and still manage to keep going? How they take blow after blow but refuse to stay down? That's not by accident. That's not just willpower. That's a divine design. God built them to withstand it, just like He built you. Consider the palm tree. During a hurricane, most trees snap under the force of the wind. They break, they uproot, they collapse. But the palm tree, it bends, it sways, it leans with the wind. And when the storm passes, it stands tall again. Why? Because its roots run deep. Because its structure was designed to endure the very force that should have destroyed it. That's how God made you. You may have been bent by life, you may have felt the force of the winds pushing against you, but you didn't break. You've been through things that would have taken someone else out. You've survived seasons where you thought, I don't know if I can make it another day, but here you are. You have fought through heartbreak, through rejection, through financial struggles, through nights of crying yourself to sleep, and yet, you're still standing. You may have scars, you may have wounds, but you are still here. And if you're still here, it means God is not finished with you. See, God doesn't just let us go through struggles for no reason. He allows pressure, but He also gives us the strength to withstand it. He allows hardships, but He also equips us with the tools to overcome. Have you ever noticed that when you look back on your life, the things that once seemed impossible now look like stepping stones? The battles you thought you wouldn't survive became the very moments that built your endurance. That's not a coincidence. That's the evidence of God's work in you. When a blacksmith wants to create something strong, he doesn't avoid the fire. He places the metal into the flames over and over again, hammering, shaping, refining it until it becomes unbreakable. The heat isn't a sign of destruction. It's a process of transformation, and that's what's happening in your life. You may feel like you're in the fire, like the pressure is unbearable, but God is using it to shape you into something greater than you ever imagined. There's more strength in you than you've ever tapped into. The problem is, most people don't realize how strong they are until they're put in a position where they have no choice but to be strong. And sometimes that's exactly what God allows. Not to break you, but to show you what you're made of. The reality is, if you were truly weak, you wouldn't still be standing. If you were truly incapable, life would have knocked you down a long time ago. But there's something in you that keeps rising. There's something in you that refuses to quit. You may feel tired, but you are not weak. You may feel weary, but you are not done. What you've been through has only proved one thing. You are built for this. You were made to overcome. You were created to endure. Nobody enjoys going through struggles. Nobody wakes up and says, God, give me more challenges today. No, we want peace. We want ease. We want things to work out smoothly. But life doesn't operate that way. Life comes with trials, setbacks, disappointments, and pain. And when we face these moments, the first question that often comes to mind is, why me? Why does it feel like every time I take a step forward, something tries to pull me back? Why do I have to go through this hardship? Why do I keep facing the same struggles over and over again? But what if I told you that your trials are not meant to break you? What if I told you that what you are going through is not meant to destroy you, but to shape you into something greater? Think about a sculptor working on a piece of marble. To an ordinary person, that slab of stone may look rough and unshaped, but to the sculptor, it is full of potential. With each strike of the chisel, pieces of the stone fall away. It may seem painful, it may seem unnecessary, but each cut is intentional. Every chip that falls brings the sculpture closer to its final masterpiece. If the marble could talk, it might say, "Why am I being hit? Why am I being broken apart?" But the sculptor knows exactly what he's doing. He sees the end result even before the process is complete. That is exactly how God works in your life. You may be going through financial struggles, relationship issues, career disappointments, or personal battles that feel unbearable. But what if I told you that these very trials are shaping you into the person you were meant to become? What if I told you that every hardship is carving away the fear, the doubt, the insecurity, and making room for something greater? God is not punishing you. He is preparing you. He is not crushing you. He is refining you. Look at the life of a tree that grows in perfect conditions, always getting just the right amount of water, never facing strong winds, never enduring storms, may look good on the outside, but its roots will be weak. But a tree that has had to stretch deep into the ground to find water, that has faced powerful winds and remains standing, that tree is unshakable. Its roots are strong, its foundation is secure, and it can withstand whatever comes against it. That's how trials work in your life. They are not there to weaken you, they are there to strengthen you. Consider the story of a butterfly. Before it spreads its wings and soars, it is confined in a cocoon, trapped in darkness. The transformation is happening inside, but from the outside it looks like nothing is moving. And then comes the struggle. The butterfly must fight its way out of the cocoon, pushing, straining, working with all its might. If someone tries to help by cutting the cocoon open, the butterfly will emerge weak, unable to fly, because the struggle was necessary. The pushing, the resistance, the pressure, it was strengthening the wings. Without the struggle, there would be no flight. That's how your trials are shaping you. The moments of pressure, the seasons of hardship, the times when it feels like nothing is working in your favor, these are the very things strengthening your wings. If you never faced resistance, you wouldn't know how to fight. If you never faced struggles, you wouldn't know how to survive. Every time you push through, every time you refuse to give up, every time you rise after falling, you are being shaped into something stronger, something greater. Look at the most powerful people in history, leaders, innovators, world changers. Their greatness was not birthed in comfort. It was born in struggle. Every success story you admire is rooted in seasons of hardship, in moments when they thought they wouldn't make it. But the difference between those who rise and those who stay stuck is how they perceive their trials. Some people see hardship as the end, while others see it as a beginning. Some people allow struggles to define them, while others use struggles to refine them. Trials expose what is inside of you. Pressure reveals whether your faith is real, whether your determination is strong, whether your mindset is ready for the next level. And sometimes, trials are necessary to remove what does not belong. Some friendships won't survive your struggles because they were never meant to. Some opportunities will close because they were distractions in disguise. Some doors will shut because they were not your destiny. The fire of trials burns away what is not meant to go with you into your next season. Think about how diamonds are formed. They don't come out of the ground looking beautiful and polished. No, they are buried deep beneath the surface under extreme heat and pressure. It is only through intense conditions that they become the diamonds we value. Without the pressure, without the refining process, they would remain ordinary rocks. That is what trials do in your life. They are shaping you, refining you, strengthening you into something extraordinary. There are moments in life when we feel like we've reached our breaking point. We say, I can't take this anymore. We feel stretched beyond our limits, burdened by trials that seem too heavy to bear. But here's what you need to understand. God knows your limits. He knows exactly how much you can handle, and He will never allow you to be tested beyond what you can bear. Think about it. If you were lifting weights in a gym and your trainer saw you struggling under a load that was too heavy, would they just stand by and watch you collapse? No! A good trainer knows exactly how much weight you can lift, how much resistance you can handle, and when you need to be pushed to grow stronger. That's exactly how God works in our lives. He doesn't allow challenges to crush you. He allows them to strengthen you. He sees your capacity even when you don't. He knows what you are capable of, even when you feel weak. The problem is, we don't always recognize our own strength. We assume that just because something feels hard, it means we can't handle it. But difficulty is not a sign of defeat. Pressure is not a sign of weakness. Sometimes God allows us to face challenges that seem beyond us because He knows what's inside of us. He knows the strength He placed within you, the endurance He built inside your spirit. Imagine a mother eagle with her baby eaglets. When it's time for them to fly, she doesn't gently push them out of the nest onto a soft pillow. No, she removes the comfort. She starts pulling out the soft feathers from the nest so that the eaglets feel the rough twigs underneath. Why? Because comfort won't make them fly. If they never experience discomfort, they will never develop their wings. And then when it's time, she pushes them out of the nest. They may flap desperately, thinking they're going to fall, but she knows something they don't. Their wings are strong enough. That's exactly what happens in our lives. When things get uncomfortable, we start questioning God. Why is this happening to me? Why do I feel like I'm falling? But God is saying, you don't see what I see. You don't know how strong you are yet. He allows situations that stretch us, moments that make us question our limits, not to break us, but to show us what we are made of. Think about the story of Job. He lost everything, his wealth, his health, his family. If anyone had a reason to say, God, this is too much, it was him. But God knew Job's limits. He knew what Job could handle. He knew that even though the enemy was attacking him, Job's faith was unshakable. And in the end, Job's trials weren't just about suffering, they were about proving his strength and preparing him for double restoration. When you feel like you're at your limit, when life feels overwhelming, when you don't think you can take another step forward, you need to remind yourself, God already measured this storm before it came your way. He already calculated the weight of this trial before it reached you. And if it was truly beyond your limits, He wouldn't have allowed it. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought, I won't survive this, and yet you did? Have you ever looked back on a season of hardship and realized you came out stronger than before? That's because God knew your limits even when you didn't. A diamond doesn't know how strong it is until it's placed under extreme pressure. A seed doesn't know its potential until it is buried underground and forced to grow. A warrior doesn't know their own endurance until they are tested in battle. And you don't know your true strength until you've been placed in situations that require it. The problem is, we want growth without resistance. We want strength without struggle, but it doesn't work that way. Muscles don't grow without being stretched. Faith doesn't grow without being tested. You won't discover what's inside of you until life puts you in a position where you have to use it. Have you ever wondered why some of the strongest people you know have been through the hardest battles? It's not because they were lucky, it's because they endured. They faced trials that should have broken them, but instead, those trials built them. They were placed under pressure, but instead of collapsing, they discovered their resilience. That same resilience is inside of you. That same strength is in your spirit. When God allows a challenge in your life, He is not testing your weakness. He is revealing your strength. He is allowing you to see what He already knows. You are capable, you are strong, and you are built to endure. There is something about reaching the end of yourself that puts you in a position for a breakthrough. We often think that when we reach our breaking point, it's over. We assume that if we've exhausted all our strength, all our resources, and all our hope, then there's nothing left but failure. But God works differently. What feels like the end to us is often the beginning of something greater. Look at the moments in the Bible when people saw God move in the most powerful ways. It wasn't when they were strong. It wasn't when they had everything figured out. It was when they were at their lowest, when they had nothing left, when they were at their breaking point. That's when God stepped in. Think about Moses standing at the Red Sea. He had led the Israelites out of Egypt, but now they were trapped. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was coming fast. In front of them, an impossible barrier. The sea. The people were panicking. They thought they had reached the end. They cried out, "Did God bring us here just to let us die?" They saw their breaking point as their downfall, but what did God do? He parted the waters. He made a way where there was no way. The very place where they thought they would perish became the place where they witnessed one of the greatest miracles in history. What if the thing you think is about to break you is actually the thing that will introduce you to a miracle? What if the thing you're trying to escape is the very thing God is using to show you His power? Look at Elijah. He was a mighty prophet, a man who had seen fire fall from heaven. But there came a moment when he was running for his life, exhausted, overwhelmed, and afraid. He reached his breaking point and prayed, "Lord, I've had enough. Just take my life." He was done. But God didn't let him break. Instead, He sent an angel to strengthen him. He gave him food and rest. And after that, Elijah went on to complete one of the greatest missions of his life. What looked like his breaking point was actually the place where God strengthened him for his next assignment. Sometimes God will let you come to the edge, not to destroy you, but to show you that He is the only one who can carry you beyond it. He will let you reach the place where your strength runs out so that you can see His strength at work. Because if you never reach the end of yourself, you will never realize the power that has been carrying you all along. Think about the woman with the issue of blood. She had suffered for 12 years. She had spent all her money, tried every doctor, exhausted every possibility. She had reached the end. But instead of giving up, she pressed through the crowd and touched Jesus' garment. That moment, her breaking point, became the moment of her healing. What if she had stopped just short of her miracle? What if she had decided it was too late, that she was too tired, that she had tried everything and nothing worked? She would have missed the breakthrough that was waiting for her on the other side of her struggle. That's what happens when we push past our breaking point. That's when we see God do what only He can do. That's when we experience the supernatural. Because miracles don't happen when everything is easy. They happen when the situation is impossible. Look at Peter walking on water. As long as he focused on Jesus, he did the impossible. But the moment he looked at the storm, he started sinking. And right when he thought he was going under, Jesus reached out His hand. Peter thought he was going to break, but Jesus caught him before he fell. How many times has God caught you before you hit the ground? How many times has He stepped in at the last moment, making a way when you thought there was no way? We often think that when we've run out of strength, it's over. But God is not limited by our limitations. In fact, he does his best work when we are at our weakest. The breaking point is not where you fail, it's where you shift. It's where you let go of your own strength and tap into his strength. It's where you surrender trying to figure everything out and start trusting the one who already knows the outcome. Sometimes God allows us to come to the end of ourselves so that we stop relying on our own power. If we could fix everything on our own, if we could carry the weight by ourselves, we would need him. But when we get to that breaking point, when we don't see a way forward, that's when he steps in and shows us that he was in control the whole time. We live in a world that tells us to be strong, to hold it together, to never show weakness. Society teaches us that admitting we're struggling is a sign of failure, but God operates differently. He doesn't expect us to be strong on our own. In fact, he tells us that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. Think about that for a moment. God is not asking you to carry the weight by yourself. He's not waiting for you to prove how tough you are. He's not standing back watching you struggle saying, figure it out. No, he is saying, when you are weak, I am strong. When you have nothing left, I will carry you. When you can't see the way, I will make a way. Have you ever noticed that when you're at your lowest, when you're completely drained, when you've cried all the tears you have left, somehow, some way, you still wake up the next day, you still take another breath, you still find the strength to take another step? That's not you, that's God. That's his power holding you up when you should have fallen. Look at Paul. He was a man of great faith, a man who preached the gospel with fire. And yet, even Paul had struggles. He had a thorn in his flesh, something that tormented him, something that made him feel weak. And he prayed, Lord, take this away from me. But God didn't remove it. Instead, he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. God didn't say, Paul, be stronger. He didn't say, figure it out. He said, let my strength carry you. Because when you come to the end of yourself, that's where God begins. When you've done all you can, when you've prayed, cried, fought, and still feel like you have nothing left, that's when his power takes over. We don't like to feel weak. We don't like to feel vulnerable. But weakness is not a curse. Weakness is an invitation for God to step in. Because if we could do everything on our own, we wouldn't need him. If we were always strong, we wouldn't rely on his power. But when we are weak, when we are struggling, when we don't know how to move forward, that's when we see just how powerful he is. Look at Gideon. When God called him to lead Israel's army, he felt unqualified. He said, Lord, I'm the least in my family. My clan is the weakest. I'm not strong enough for this. But God didn't choose him because he was strong. He chose him because God's strength would be revealed through him. When Gideon obeyed, God gave him victory with only 300 men against an army of thousands. Look at David. He was just a shepherd boy when he faced Goliath. By all human standards, he was weak. He had no armor, no great weapon, no military experience. But he didn't need those things. He had God's strength. And with one small stone, he took down a giant. Look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Before he went to the cross, he prayed in agony. He was in such distress that he sweat drops of blood. He cried out, Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. In that moment, he was at his weakest. But that was also the moment that led to the greatest victory in history, because God's strength was revealed in what looked like the darkest, weakest moment. So often we think that when we are struggling, when we feel weak, it means we are failing. But God is saying, this is where I show up. This is where I carry you. This is where my strength is revealed. Have you ever gone through something and thought, there is no way I can survive this, but you did? Have you ever faced a battle that should have taken you out, but somehow you kept going? That wasn't your own strength. That was God's strength working in you. We have to stop believing the lie that we have to be strong all the time. We have to stop thinking that our struggles disqualify us from God's power, because the truth is, Our weakness is not a sign of failure. It's an open door for God's strength to work in our lives. There are moments in life when we feel like we don't have what it takes to keep going. Moments when the pressure is too much, the pain is too deep, and the road ahead seems too hard. We look at our situation and think, I'm not strong enough for this. I don't have what it takes. But God says otherwise. God has already placed inside of you everything you need to endure. Before the storm ever came, before the battle ever began, before the struggle ever showed up, He had already equipped you with the strength, the grace, and the power to make it through. Think about a seed. A tiny, insignificant seed doesn't look like much when you hold it in your hand, but inside that seed is everything it needs to grow into a tree. The potential is already there. It doesn't become strong by sitting in the sun. It has to be buried. It has to be put in the dark. It has to be pressed under the weight of the soil. Only then does it begin to push through, to stretch, to grow. You might feel like you're in a dark place right now. You might feel buried, under pressure, under stress, under struggle, but you are not buried, you are planted. And inside of you, God has placed everything you need to rise up, to push through, and to become stronger than you ever imagined. Look at Joseph. He had a dream that he would be a great leader, that he would rise to power, but before that dream came true, he was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, and locked in prison. Everything in his life seemed to be working against him. But what Joseph didn't realize in those moments of struggle was that he already had everything he needed inside of him. He didn't become strong when he reached the palace. He was already strong when he was in the pit. He didn't become favored when he got his position. He was already favored when he was in prison. The same is true for you. What you are facing right now does not define you. The pressure you're under is not breaking you. It's revealing what God has already placed inside of you. The strength, the wisdom, the faith, the endurance, it's already there. Look at the story of David. When he faced Goliath, he didn't go out and try to become someone he wasn't. He didn't put on Saul's armor. He didn't try to fight like someone else. He used what he already had, a sling and a stone, because what God had placed in his hands was already enough. You don't need to look for strength in the world. You don't need to wait for someone to give you permission to rise up. God has already given you everything you need. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is inside of you. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who shut the mouths of lions, who walked with men in the fire, He is walking with you. Look at Esther. She was just a young woman, an orphan raised by her cousin, living an ordinary life. But when the time came for her to step up and save her people, she didn't need to become something new. She already had courage inside of her. She already had wisdom inside of her. She already had God's favor upon her life. She just needed to step into what God had already placed inside of her. Some of us are waiting for the strength to come before we move. We're waiting to feel ready. We're waiting for the right moment. But God doesn't give you strength and then tell you to move. He tells you to move, and as you step forward, you realize you already had the strength. Look at the woman with the issue of blood. She had suffered for 12 long years. She had tried everything. She had spent all her money. She had every reason to believe that things would never change. But something inside of her refused to quit. Something inside of her knew, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. She didn't wait for someone to carry her. She didn't wait for an invitation. She pressed through the crowd. She used what she had, her faith, and that faith which was already inside of her activated her healing. You have been through things that should have broken you. You have faced battles that should have taken you out. But you are still here. You are still standing, not because you figured it all out, Not because life has been easy, but because God put something inside of you that refuses to quit. That's why the enemy has been fighting you so hard. That's why life has been pressing you on every side. Because the enemy knows what's inside of you. He knows that if you ever fully tap into what God has placed in you, there will be no stopping you. If you ever wake up and realize that you already have everything you need to endure, you will rise up with a strength that no attack, no storm, and no battle can take away. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you that you are strong enough. You don't have to wait for the perfect conditions. You don't have to wait for everything to be easy. You just have to believe that God has already given you what you need. Because when He formed you, when He called you, when He anointed you, He placed everything inside of you that you would ever need to endure, to overcome, and to walk in victory. You may have felt like life has pushed you to your limit. You may have wondered if you had what it takes to keep going, but hear me today. You are stronger than you think. Not because of your own strength, but because of the power that is working within you. The enemy tried to break you, but God wouldn't let him. The storm tried to take you out, but God held you together. The weight of life pressed you on every side, but you didn't crumble, because God has placed something inside of you that cannot be destroyed. The very fact that you are still here is proof that God's hand is on your life. If He wanted to leave you, He would have done it already. If He wanted to let you fall, you would have hit the ground by now. But He is keeping you, He is sustaining you, He is building you, and what you thought was breaking you was actually shaping you into the person you were always meant to be. So lift your head, stand firm, wipe your tears, because God won't let you break. What He started in you, He will finish. What He promised, He will fulfill. What He placed inside of you, He will bring forth in due time. And when you look back, you will realize that every battle, every storm, every struggle was not your breaking point, it was your birthing place.